In the highlands of what is now Mexico, long before the Spanish ships appeared on the horizon, there were stones carved in the shape of mushrooms. Some of them are more than 2,500 years old. They stand about a foot tall, a mushroom cap rising from a base, and carved into that base, a face. A god's face. A spirit. An ancestor. Archaeologists call them mushroom stones, and no one knows exactly what ceremonies they presided over. But we know what the people who came after them believed. We know the name they gave to a certain small, unremarkable mushroom that grew in their fields. They called it Tiananacatl, flesh of the gods. This is the secret history of Psilocybin, the sacred mushroom of the Americas. It is a history of gods and visions, of a conquest that tried to erase it, of a mysterious healer in a mountain village, and of a modern science that is only now, after centuries of silence, beginning to take it seriously again. And like everything in this hidden world, it is far stranger and older than you have been told. Let us begin with the mushroom itself. Psilocybin mushrooms are not one species, but many, small, brownish, easily overlooked fungi that grow across much of the world, often in grasslands and on the dung of grazing animals. What makes them extraordinary is a single molecule they produce, called psilocybin. When eaten, the body converts it into a related compound that fits, with uncanny precision, into certain receptors in the human brain, the very same receptors that respond to serotonin, one of the brain's master chemicals of mood and perception. And when psilocybin occupies those receptors, perception comes loose from its moorings. Colors brief, boundaries dissolve. The rigid line between self and world grows thin. To a modern neuroscientist, this is pharmacology. To the ancient peoples of Mesoamerica, it was something else entirely. It was a doorway to the divine. The cultures of ancient Mexico, the Maya, the Aztec, and others before them, built entire spiritual practices around this experience. In the language of the Aztecs, Nahuatl, the mushroom's name, Tiananacatl, translated directly to flesh of the gods, and that was no metaphor. Eating the mushroom was understood as consuming the divine, taking the substance of a god into your own body in order to speak with the spirit world, to see the future, to heal the sick, to touch realms hidden from ordinary sight. Their myths said the mushrooms had been given to their ancestors by a creator god. Spanish chroniclers who arrived in the 16th century recorded, with a mixture of fascination and horror, mass consumption of these mushrooms at great ceremonies, including, by one account, at the coronation of the Emperor Montezuma II. One friar, Bernardino de Sahagun, carefully documented the use of Tiananacatl for visions and healing, leaving a written trace that would matter enormously centuries later. But the arrival of the Spanish was also the beginning of a long darkness for the sacred mushroom. To the Catholic authorities of the conquest, these were not sacraments. They were demonic, a rival path to the divine that had to be destroyed. Missionaries worked to stamp out the ceremonies, to erase the records, to drive the ancient practice into extinction. And to a large extent, in the open, they succeeded. The mushroom cults vanished from public view. For roughly 400 years, the outside world believed Tiananacatl was gone, perhaps a myth, perhaps a mistranslation, a curiosity in the dusty writings of an old friar. It was not gone. It had simply gone quiet. Deep in the mountains of Oaxaca, among indigenous peoples like the Mazatec, the tradition survived in secret, passed down through generations, hidden from outsiders, kept alive in nighttime healing ceremonies. And in the middle of the 20th century, that hidden river surfaced again, through the meeting of two very different people. One was a woman named María Sabina, a Mazatec healer, a curandera, who conducted sacred mushroom vigils, all-night ceremonies of chanting and prayer and vision, to heal the sick of her community. The other was an American banker and amateur mushroom enthusiast named R. Gordon Wasson. In 1955, Wasson and his wife traveled to that remote mountain village, and María Sabina allowed them to take part in a mushroom ceremony, making them among the first outsiders ever documented to do so. Wasson was profoundly shaken by the experience. And then he did something with enormous consequences. He published it. In 1957, A major American magazine ran his account under the title Seeking the Magic Mushroom. That phrase, magic mushroom, entered the language and never left. And the article detonated. It brought the sacred, secret practice of a mountain village into the living rooms of millions. Scientists took notice. The mushrooms Wasson brought back were identified, and the chemist Albert Hofmann, the same man who had earlier synthesized LSD from ergot, isolated the active compounds, psilocybin and psilocin, giving them names and chemical formulas for the first time. The flesh of the gods had become a molecule in a laboratory. For María Sabina, the consequences were painful. The publicity brought a flood of outsiders into her quiet village, curiosity seekers who cared nothing for the sacred meaning of the ceremony. Her community turned against her for revealing what should have stayed hidden. A tradition that had survived 4 centuries of suppression was, in a sense, wounded by its own sudden fame. It is a sobering thread in this story, a reminder that uncovering a secret history can also disturb something living and fragile. And then there is the most audacious idea attached to these mushrooms, one I want to share carefully, because it lies at the very edge of science. In the 20th century, a thinker named Terence McKenna proposed what became known as the Stoned Ape hypothesis. He suggested that psilocybin mushrooms, eaten by our distant human ancestors as they followed grazing animals across the African landscape, might have played a role in the rapid expansion of the human mind, sharpening perception, sparking imagination, perhaps even helping give rise to language and creativity. It is a bold, romantic, and deeply controversial idea. Most scientists regard it as speculation, unsupported by hard evidence, and I want to be honest with you about that. It is a hypothesis, not a proven fact, and it should be held as one. But it captures something worth sitting with. The possibility that our relationship with this fungus is not a modern novelty, but something ancient, woven somewhere into the long story of what made us human. What is no longer speculation is where the science now stands. After decades of prohibition, when psilocybin was locked away as a forbidden substance and research nearly ceased, the modern era has seen a careful, rigorous return. Serious institutions are now studying psilocybin under controlled conditions for its effects on depression, on anxiety, in people facing terminal illness, on addiction. The early findings have been striking enough that what was once dismissed is now among the most closely watched frontiers in mental health research. The flesh of the gods, exiled for centuries, is being invited back into the laboratory, this time with scientific instruments in hand. Step back and look at the full arc, because it is remarkable. A small brown mushroom growing in a field, carved into stone by people 2,500 years ago, worshipped as the body of a god by great civilizations, hunted and suppressed by conquerors who feared its power, hidden for 4 centuries in the mountains, kept alive by healers like María Sabina, revealed again to the world, for better and for worse, through a magazine article, reduced to a molecule by a chemist, and now, in our own time, cautiously reconsidered as a possible medicine for some of the deepest sufferings of the human mind. The ancient peoples who called it flesh of the gods did not have our chemistry. They could not speak of serotonin receptors or controlled clinical trials, but they were certain, across thousands of years, that this mushroom did something profound to the human spirit, something worth building ceremonies and carving gods around. And once again, as with so many fungi in this hidden history, when modern science finally turned to look, it did not find an empty superstition. It found a molecule of genuine and startling power, one we are still, even now, only beginning to understand. The gods, it turns out, were not entirely a fantasy. They were pointing, in the only language they had, at something real growing quietly in the grass. In the next Secret History, we follow the trail of the sacred mushroom into the frozen north, to a red and white fungus tangled with Viking warriors, Siberian shamans, flying reindeer, and, astonishingly, the modern legend of Santa Claus. The strange story of the fly agaric. If this hidden world is calling to you, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.